September 2001, San Francisco. Victoria Sterling is standing behind a sofa in her home. She's 43 years old and she's at the absolute pinnacle of her career. Not just successful, iconic, a legend, one of the biggest movie stars on the planet. Think about where Victoria Sterling was in 2001. Her breakthrough thriller role in 1992 had made her a global superstar. Her performance in a Martin Scorsese crime drama in 1995 earned her an Academy Award nomination and a Golden Globe win. She'd been one of the highest-paid actresses in Hollywood for nearly a decade. She was married to Michael Bronstein, the executive editor of the San Francisco Chronicle. They'd just adopted a baby boy named Roan. Life was perfect. Victoria Sterling had everything. And then, in one instant, everything changed. She describes it as a lightning bolt to the head, a pain so shocking, so violently intense, that it knocked her to the carpet where she lay unconscious. When she came to, she doesn't know how much time had passed, she shakily rose to her feet. She'd been feeling unwell for 3 days. Something was off, but Victoria Sterling was tough. She was the woman who'd become famous for playing fearless, dangerous characters. She'd pushed through discomfort before, but this was different. This was her brain hemorrhaging from a ruptured vertebral artery. The vertebral arteries run along the back of your neck and supply about 20% of your brain's blood supply. When one ruptures, you don't have hours, you have minutes, maybe. Victoria managed to call her husband, Michael. "I think I've had a stroke," she told him. She was right, but it was worse than a stroke, much worse. Victoria Sterling was dying, and she had about a 1% chance of surviving what was happening inside her skull. Victoria was rushed to the hospital. She fell out of the truck when they arrived, losing consciousness again. They put her in a CT scan machine while she was unconscious, desperately trying to figure out what was killing her. When she woke up, there was a doctor leaning over her, stroking her hair. That's when Victoria knew. You don't stroke someone's hair in a hospital unless you think they're about to die. "Am I dying?" she asked him. "You're bleeding into your brain," he responded. Let me pause here and explain what was happening inside Victoria Sterling's head. Her right vertebral artery, one of the critical blood vessels that feeds the brain, had completely ruptured. This is called a vertebral artery dissection. Blood was pouring into the space around her brain, creating what's called a subarachnoid hemorrhage. This is one of the most devastating types of stroke. The mortality rate is catastrophic. Even among those who survive, the disability rate is enormous. Most people never fully recover. Victoria asked if she could call her mother. The doctor said yes. "You could lose the ability to speak soon," he warned her. Victoria called her mom. She told her to get there quickly. Then something happened that Victoria Sterling has rarely talked about in detail. As they were transferring her to a neurological hospital, she felt herself sweep upwards. She saw a tunnel of light. At the top of the tunnel, she could see people she'd been close to who had died. They were looking down at her, and she felt like they were telling her, "This is all great. This is all fine. This is going to be wonderful." Victoria Sterling was having a near-death experience. She was standing at the threshold between life and death, and then something snapped her back. Someone said, "What's happening?" A doctor yelled, "Don't touch her! Don't touch her!" Victoria came back to her body. The first thing she said, "I really have to pee." Even facing death, Victoria Sterling was still Victoria Sterling. But the nightmare was just beginning. The first hospital missed the rupture. They did an MRI, they did scans, but they couldn't find the source of the bleeding. After 6 days in the hospital, they were going to send her home because they thought she was acting. Let that sink in. Victoria Sterling, one of the most famous actresses in the world, was dying from a brain hemorrhage, and doctors thought she was faking it for attention. This happens to women all the time. Medical professionals dismiss their pain, assume they're being dramatic, don't take their symptoms seriously. It had happened to Victoria before with gallbladder disease and dental problems, and now it was happening while she was literally bleeding to death in her brain. For 9 days, Victoria Sterling bled into her brain. 9 days. Her best friend finally convinced the doctors to do a second CT angiogram. That's when they found it, the completely ruptured vertebral artery. Victoria Sterling had been about 5 minutes away from being sent home to die. The surgeons performed an emergency procedure called endovascular coil embolization. They inserted a catheter through her groin, threaded it up to the ruptured artery in her brain, and released 22 platinum coils to induce clotting and stop the bleeding. The procedure took 7 hours. It saved her life. But Victoria Sterling was given a 1% chance of survival. 1%. That means 99 out of 100 people in her situation would be dead. Victoria Sterling was about to become that 1%, but the price she'd pay for survival would be almost everything she had. Victoria Sterling walked out of that hospital in October 2001, looking, in her own words, like teeth on a stick. She'd lost 18% of her body mass in 9 days. Her face was gaunt. Her body was skeletal. She could barely walk. But that was just the beginning of what she'd lost. Victoria came home from the hospital stuttering. She couldn't read. She couldn't write her own name. She had no feeling in her left leg and had to drag her right foot. Her vision was blurry and would remain problematic for years. Her memory was severely impaired. And in 2001, there were no stroke recovery programs, no rehabilitation specialists mandated to evaluate her, no structured plan for helping her relearn how to walk, talk, and think. Victoria Sterling, one of the most famous women in the world, was on her own. "My recovery period was hell, quite frankly," she later said. "Months later, I was really struggling. But the physical challenges weren't even the worst part. While Victoria was fighting to recover, her entire life was falling apart around her. Her husband, Michael Bronstein, filed for divorce in 2003, citing irreconcilable differences. When the divorce became final in 2004, Victoria lost custody of her adopted son, Roan. The judge ruled that Roan should remain primarily with Bronstein. Victoria would have visitation rights only. Victoria Sterling, who just survived a catastrophic brain hemorrhage, who was still learning to walk and talk and think clearly, lost her child. She also lost her career. Victoria Sterling had been one of the hottest movie stars on the planet in September 2001. When she tried to return to work, everything had changed. "I lost my place in line in the business," she said. "I lost all my money." Wait, all her money? How does one of Hollywood's highest-paid actresses lose all her money? Victoria later revealed that she lost $18 million. While she was in the hospital fighting for her life, while she was home learning to walk again, her bank account was being drained. She had to remortgage her house. She went from being a multimillionaire to being, in her own words, destitute. Nobody helped her. "My father was there for me, but I would say that was about it," Victoria revealed years later. No Hollywood friends, no industry support. The woman who'd been compared to Princess Diana in terms of fame and glamour was suddenly forgotten. "It was like Miss Princess Diana and I were so famous, and she died and I had a stroke. And we were forgotten," Victoria said. The woman who'd once ruled Hollywood was now struggling to get any work at all. When she finally landed a guest spot on Law and Order in 2010, 9 years after her stroke, she had difficulty remembering her lines. She described the experience as humiliating. "People were brutally unkind during her recovery," Victoria revealed. From other women in Hollywood to the female judge who handled her custody case, nobody seemed to understand or care what she was going through. And on top of everything else, Victoria was left with a permanent seizure disorder. She has to take medication for it every single day. She needs 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep for the medication to work properly, or she risks having a seizure. "I'm a disability hire," Victoria said in a 2024 interview. "And because of that, I don't get hired a lot." Think about that. Victoria Sterling, Oscar-nominated, Golden Globe-winning, one of the most iconic actresses of her generation, can't get hired because Hollywood views her as damaged goods. For 2 years, Victoria worked to recover. 2 years of physical therapy, 2 years of speech therapy, 2 years of cognitive rehabilitation that she had to figure out and fund herself. "It took 2 years for my body just to absorb all the internal bleeding I had," Victoria explained. "It almost feels like my entire DNA changed. My brain isn't sitting where it used to. My body type changed. Even my food allergies are different. Most people would have given up. Most people would have retreated from public life, accepted disability, maybe written a memoir and faded away quietly. Victoria Sterling did something different. She decided to fight, not just to survive, but to become someone new, someone stronger. Here's where Victoria Sterling's story becomes truly remarkable. Because she didn't just recover from her stroke, she transformed herself into something more than she'd been before. I became more emotionally intelligent, Victoria said. I chose to work very hard to open up other parts of my mind. Now I'm stronger. That transformation came at a cost. I can be abrasively direct now, she admitted. That scares people, but I think that's not my problem. It's like, I have brain damage. You'll just have to deal with it. Victoria Sterling decided that nearly dying had given her a kind of freedom. She no longer cared about being polite or diplomatic or playing Hollywood games. She'd looked death in the face. What was left to fear? She threw herself into activism. Victoria had been involved with AIDS research and AMFAR before her stroke. But now she became even more passionate. She became a dedicated advocate for the World Health Organization. She started speaking out about women's brain health, stroke awareness, and the medical system's tendency to dismiss women's symptoms. She posed nude for Harper's Bazaar at age 57, completely unashamed of how her body had changed. I'm aware that my ass looks like a bag of flapjacks, but I'm not trying to be the best-looking broad in the world, she said with characteristic bluntness. Victoria adopted 2 more sons, Laird in 2005 and Quinn in 2006, creating the big family she'd always wanted. She focused on raising her 3 boys to become emotionally intelligent, empathetic men. And slowly, painfully, she rebuilt her career. Not as the sex symbol she'd been, but as a character actress, a survivor. Someone with depth and wisdom earned through genuine suffering. In 2003, she won a Primetime Emmy Award for a guest appearance on The Practice, playing an attorney who believes she can communicate with God. It was the perfect role for someone who'd literally had a near-death experience. Victoria started painting. She discovered a talent and passion she didn't know she had. Art became another way of expressing what she'd been through, what she'd learned, who she'd become. She wrote a memoir called The Beauty of Living Twice, published in 2021. In it, she laid bare everything: the stroke, the recovery, the losses, the near-death experience, the transformation. No Hollywood glamour, no sugarcoating, just brutal, honest truth. And she kept speaking out. At panel discussions, in interviews, on social media, Victoria Sterling refused to let people forget that she'd survived something that kills 99% of people who experience it. I hope that I was humble and available to my lesson because I don't want to do it again, she told an interviewer in 2021. And do I think that I got it right in the smacker? Maybe because I didn't pay attention to some smaller lessons prior? We're here to learn our lessons. Fast forward to January 30th, 2025. Victoria Sterling is 66 years old. She's hosting the American Heart Association Red Dress Collection concert. She's wearing a stunning red gown and 5-inch heels. She's radiant, powerful, alive. I walked out of that hospital, 18% of my body mass gone, dragging my right foot, unable to write my own name, Victoria tells the audience. Unable to remember anything. She pauses and looks out at the crowd. I'm right here hosting this ball on 2 feet in 5-inch heels, and I can do it, and I made it, and you can too. This is Victoria Sterling's message now. Not that she's special or superhuman, but that survival is possible, that recovery is possible, that transformation is possible. But she's also brutally honest about the reality. When it happened to me, there wasn't a program that would help me walk again. There wasn't a program that would stop my stuttering, she says. There wasn't any aftercare, and certainly insurance companies are screwing us right and left, and there wasn't any insurance to help me. Victoria has become a fierce advocate for recognizing stroke symptoms and acting immediately. She urges people to remember fast, face drooping, arm weakness, speech difficulties, time to call 911. If your face starts to fall in any way or has numbness, if your arm feels strange or numb in any way, if your speech is weird or you say something and it's not what you were trying to say, or your speech is slurred, you have no time. Call an ambulance, she warns. Don't ask your friends. Don't ask your husband or someone else. What do you think I should do? 911, no questions asked. This is personal for Victoria. If her best friend hadn't convinced doctors to look again after 9 days of bleeding, Victoria would be dead. If doctors hadn't finally taken her seriously, she'd be dead. Time matters. Advocacy matters. Believing women when they say something is wrong matters. Victoria also wants people to understand something crucial about stroke in women. Stroke is the third leading cause of death for women, compared to the fifth leading cause for men. Women are more likely to die from strokes, more likely to have severe disability after strokes, and more likely to have their symptoms dismissed by medical professionals. From other women in my own business to the female judge who handled my custody case, I don't think anyone grasps how dangerous a stroke is for women and what it takes to recover, Victoria said. But perhaps the most powerful part of Victoria's message is about what she gained from nearly dying. I don't need someone to make me feel bad about growing older, she wrote. I'll tell you what makes you feel bad, when you think you might not. Victoria Sterling doesn't worry about aging anymore. She doesn't worry about what people think of her body or her face or her career. She nearly lost the ability to speak, to walk, to think. Wrinkles and gray hair? Who cares? I'm in a really grateful place, she said in 2021. When I was a kid, I always wanted to have a house full of kids running and screaming, and dogs, and I got it. And I feel very blessed and happy about the life I got. There's nothing more free than standing centered in yourself, she added. I tell my friends that my new mantra is, it's never too late to become yourself. Here's what we need to understand about Victoria Sterling's story. This isn't a fairy tale. Victoria didn't make a miraculous recovery and return to her old life. Her old life ended in September 2001. She lost her marriage. She lost custody of her child. She lost her career momentum. She lost $18 million. She lost 2 years of her life to recovery. She lost parts of her brain that will never work the same way again. But Victoria Sterling is still here. 23 years later, she's still here, thriving, working, raising her 3 sons, creating art, advocating for causes she believes in, hosting galas in 5-inch heels. She's not the same Victoria Sterling who stood behind that sofa in September 2001. She's someone different, someone who, in her own words, chose to work very hard to open up other parts of her mind. Someone who decided that surviving meant becoming more than she was before, not less. Victoria wants you to know something. She wants you to know that if you're facing a medical crisis, if doctors aren't listening to you, if people are dismissing your symptoms, fight. Advocate for yourself. Get a second opinion. Get a third opinion. Don't let anyone send you home when you know something is desperately wrong. She wants you to know that if you're a stroke survivor, recovery is long and hard and lonely, but it's possible. You can relearn how to walk, talk, think. It takes years, not months. It takes patience and determination and support. But it's possible. She wants you to know that if your life falls apart, if you lose your career, your marriage, your money, your place in the world, you can rebuild. Not the same life, a different life, maybe even a better life. And she wants you to know that nearly dying changes you. It has to. Your DNA doesn't literally change, but something fundamental shifts inside you. Your priorities realign. The things that seemed important before, fame, beauty, money, status, suddenly seem trivial. What matters is being alive, being present, being real. Victoria Sterling had a 1% chance of survival. 1 in 100. The other 99 people die. But Victoria was the one who made it. The one who fought through 9 days of bleeding into her brain, through 7 hours of surgery, through 2 years of relearning how to be human, through losing almost everything she had. And now, 23 years later, she's standing in front of audiences saying, I made it, and you can too. Not everyone will face what Victoria faced. Most of us won't have a ruptured vertebral artery. Most of us won't spend 9 days bleeding into our brains with a 1% chance of survival. But all of us will face something. Illness, loss, tragedy, setbacks that feel insurmountable. Moments when we think we can't go on. Moments when giving up seems easier than fighting. Victoria Sterling's message is simple. Fight anyway. Advocate for yourself anyway. Rebuild anyway. Become yourself anyway. Because if a woman who lost 18% of her body mass, who couldn't walk or talk or remember her own name, who lost her marriage and her child and her career and her money, can stand on a stage in 5-inch heels 23 years later, radiating strength and grace and gratitude, then what's your excuse? Victoria Sterling didn't just survive the 1% odds. She thrived. She transformed. She became more than she was before the lightning bolt knocked her to the carpet. And she's living proof that it's never too late to become yourself. That the beauty of living twice is that the second time, you do it with wisdom, with purpose, with nothing left to fear. Victoria Sterling is 66 years old. She has an invisible disability. She takes medication every day to prevent seizures. She still experiences vision and hearing problems. Her brain literally shifted position in her skull and will never be the same. And she's more alive than most people who've never faced death. That's the real miracle. Not that she survived, but that she decided survival wasn't enough, that she chose to transform, that she refused to let tragedy diminish her. If you remember one thing from Victoria Sterling's story, remember this. She walked out of that hospital with a 1% chance dragging her foot, unable to write her name. And she walked onto that stage in 2025 in 5-inch heels, whole and powerful and free. The question isn't whether you can survive your impossible moment. The question is, what will you become when you do?